The Zenit E is a 35mm Soviet camera with an M42 lens mount. Made in the USSR, it was produced for 22 years between 1965 and 1986. It is a heavy, chunky, and sometimes clumsy camera, but is it worth your time? Hi everyone, Azriel Knight here, and today we're going to take a look at my first impressions of the Zenit E. A little backstory on my personal finds here. I got two Zenit E's. One came with the Helios 44-2 58mm f2 lens, the other with an Industar 50mm f3.5. I have what looks like an older model here with a little body damage. The other one looked newer and cleaner but locked up before I had a chance to put a roll in. When people talk about the Zenit E, it's hard not to talk about the Helios lens, known for its funky bokeh. One of the things you're going to notice on the Helios lens is that it has both designated aperture settings and a stepless ring. The idea here is once you know your exposure, you set the aperture with this clicky ring, then open up again with the stepless ring to help you focus, then close down again. With the clicky part, making sure you don't close down too far. At least that's the way I used it. I don't use screw mount cameras very often, so I forget the aperture doesn't close down when the shutter is released, but just sits there at whatever you set it to. I kind of found the overall placement confusing. I'm so used to the aperture ring being in the back. My Nikon 50mm lens is the opposite. Focus on the front, aperture at the back. The Industar lens is the same except it's stepless only. Adjusting the shutter setting is done by lifting and rotating to line up with the mark here. It doesn't matter if you advance first or after adjusting the shutter speed, you don't have to worry about messing up the mechanics. While the principle of a batteryless light meter is neat, I would not count on the built-in light meter, which uses selenium. They almost always lose their sensitivity over time. Looking into the viewfinder is like staring at a classic arcade machine with the rounded corners and the reflection on the bottom. One of the biggest issues I ran into was opening my aperture to focus and then forgetting to close down again before taking the shot. If you are committed to buying this camera, it'll be an extra step to remember. I'm going to give you my personal pros and cons as well as tips if you have one or are interested, but first, here are a few photos I took with the Zenit E. Alright, let's talk about some pros and cons. First, the pros. An M42 mount gives you an incredibly wide range of lenses, reliable lenses that don't have as many mechanics. And it's inexpensive, you can get one for about $100 shipped. And now the cons. The built-in light meter is unlikely to work and you'll need an external one. You have to set your own frame counter when you put the roll in. Something I forgot to do both test rolls, and if you forget, you're left guessing on how many photos you have left. Ergonomically, it feels terrible. It's heavier than it needs to be, and while this might have been all that was available at the time in the region it was made in, I'm comparing it to what we can find now. There are a lot of other cameras out there with a similar price point that will offer more comfort and features. The last thing I should mention is that there will be a lot of taking your eye away to readjust, to change the shutter speed, to change the aperture, as well as open it to focus and close it down again. Honestly, I think there's a subset of film photographers out there that just love Soviet cameras. I have owned the Fed 5 and Kiev 4, and while they can be classy looking tools, they feel janky. After putting a couple rolls through, I knew this wasn't the camera for me, so here are my tips to determine if this is the camera that's right for you. Tip 1. Make sure you're prepared with a good light meter and don't mind using it. And tip number 2, be ready for the reduced visibility from closing down your aperture before firing the shutter. If you are okay with both those aspects, you'll probably do just fine with this camera. And that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed my first impressions on the Zenit E. I didn't mean to poo-poo all over it, but it's just what I got out of the experience. Do you agree with my assessment? Be sure and let me know what you think in the comments section. And if you like what I do around here, please consider becoming my patron on Patreon. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And until next time, stay classic.